Coming up on this episode of Nothing to Bring.
We explore Matt's favourite Easter eggs. Sarah requests suggestions for books to read before moving on to strict schools, ADHD on the TV, and Sarah's love of negative reviews.
I'm Matt Morris.
I'm Sarah Johnson, and we have
Nothing to Bring. So just before we started this episode, we do a little bit of a preamble, don't we? We sort of plan what we're going to be talking about. Then we start talking about stuff we should record. And one of the things Jess said is, my mum listens to this, which was something we talked about previously, because you asked if my mum listened to this, but your mum does
refuses to listen to it.
It's not really in her wheelhouse, to be honest, but your mum does listen to this, doesn't she?
I don't think this is in my mum's wheelhouse either. I just think she's incredibly enthusiastic about me doing stuff.
However, as I understand it, she was in agreement with me that you can call it a foof.
So, growing up, my mum and my grandmother had various different terminologies. I can't even say them because they're so bad. And I think that they're really offensive in certain cultures as well. So I think the translation from Yiddish into some other languages, it comes across really bad. I might as well just be dropping the C-bomb. But you'd say like punny for vagina.
Okay.
And that's what you'd call it. And penis would obviously be dinkle as standard. Like,
dinkle.
Penises are always dinkles, aren't they? Even as an adult, I think. I don't know. I don't know what you call.
What do I call a penis? A penis. I don't know if I can remember it. There was one. So my family are Spanish. My grandmother is Spanish.
How did I not know
this? I'm
this?
sure you know this.
I do not know this. You have kept it secret.
I say my grandmother. My grandmother was Spanish. She made it into her 90s. Incredible woman. Came over to England, not really able to speak much English, and in her life had a handle of the language, but couldn't read or write in Spanish at all. Could barely read or write in English, but, could easily hold a conversation in English. I'm trying to remember the word. Now, I don't know if it was a Spanish word, but it was a word that was used. And again, I feel like if I use it, I'm not going to say it just right now because I feel like it could be really offensive. Like, you know how you said, I think maybe that might be offensive. I reckon this is offensive.
I'm pretty sure it's not offensive in Yiddish, but I'm pretty wherever that phrase come from, but I'm sure I've said it to some of my black friends and they've gone, what? So yeah, Jamaican heritage.
You see, because I've just Googled what the word vagina is in Spanish and it's la vagina. So this definitely, and I mean that could be really wrong as well, but yeah, the word they use, I don't know if it was just made up.
Yeah, it probably was. It's probably a sort of diminutive.
Okay, so there's a Spanish, Latin America, but it's informal and vulgar, and it's pronounced C-H-O-C-H-O, like chocho.
Choo-choo?
The word that my Spanish grandmother used to use was shosho. Yeah. So.
Well, she wouldn't have been swearing.
No, probably not. But I don't know if that's offensive or not.
I know. Maybe your grandmother would have sworn effing and jeffing and just using really offensive terminology. I didn't know you were Spanish heritage.
Yeah. This has come up in conversation many times, surely.
No, it's never come up. You've kept it a secret.
Well, one of my grandparents was Spanish, so I'm a small fraction of me is Spanish. I like to say I'm half Spanish. I'm not nowhere near half Spanish. But,
do you speak Spanish?
Yeah, not a jot. I can barely hold it together with English. So,
as people have attested to.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So let's just go back because a couple of things from the last episode. Number one was I used the word foof instead of vagina. You criticised me for that and said it was, well, not criticised, but said it's okay to use the word vagina. Okay, fine. I criticised, definitely criticised, Matt. Okay, fine. In the comments, there was a comment that said disappointed that they didn't have vagina in the title of the episode.
You're trying to keep your job though, aren't you?
Yeah, and to be honest, I could quite easily have titled it with vagina in the title of the episode. The only reason I didn't was because I don't really know yet what the algorithm is doing for anything we throw at it in YouTube. So that's why I was just hesitant about using any sort of language like that. Anyway, however, what I do know is your mum messaged you and said it is a foof.
Yeah, she went foof is the right word, yeah. It's not a word she would use. She just doesn't like using the correct terminology.
No, and some people don't. But I also understand that her pet bird was listening to the episode as well.
Basil was really enjoying it. African grey parrot. So my mum sent a video that I forwarded on to Matt of an African grey parrot just listening to us. Actually, Basil hates me and he was probably trying to destroy me. He cannot stand me. He will attack me. If I'm on the phone to my mum. He goes mad and starts having a go at my mum. Yeah, he's not a nice parrot. Parrots aren't actually nice creatures. They're quite possessive.
Okay.
Sorry, Basil.
I've got to move this because it's not right for some reason. I think that's
Do you know why it's wrong?
Why?
Because you're wearing a hoodie and not a t-shirt, and it's your whole kind of being is off.
Yeah, as we've said, this is the coolest part of my house, and it's really cool.
It's
here
like
at the moment.
27 degrees today.
It's absolutely fine. It is warm, yeah, but I'm quite nice and cool here. Got a really nice airflow coming through from the doors are open out the back, so it's lovely. It's going to be horrible later this week. So we've actually cancelled our plans, haven't we?
Yeah, we were meant to go on going to Chesterton World of Adventures together. I was quite excited.
We were.
With all the children, with all the wives and husbands, the wags.
Mm-hmm.
But it was going to be something like 35 degrees, something like
Possibly higher. I think it was getting on for 38.
Yeah, and we just went, that is a ridiculous idea to take.
Yeah.
9 and 10-year-olds? Is that how old your kids are?
8 and 10.
8 and 10, yeah.
They, we've just come back off holiday. We've just been to Turkey where it was like 34, 35 degrees every day, which was fine when you're on holiday because you're pretty much laying around, and then when you get hot, you jump in a swimming pool. If you're standing in queues, because it will be busy, despite how hot it is, it will be busy. That would just be unbearable. So it was the right thing to do.
So you could have had nothing to bring on tour, but unfortunately, we're going to be in our respective houses just going, it is really quite hot.
Yeah, probably. You see, we did it. We actually went to Alton Towers in similar sort of heat at the end of lockdown because we hadn't been out of the house for a long time. We had Merlin passes for years, and we live 45 minutes from Alton Towers. It came to the end of lockdown, and they were just starting to open things up. We were like, we are going to use these passes, and we're going to go to Alton Towers, irrespective of temperatures, whatever else. We had that really glorious summer that year, and we went there, and it was the most unbearable thing ever because it was so hot. But you also had to still stick to all of the advisory things that they put in place, like keeping 2 meters apart in queues. It was just unbearable, and that was distanced from people. So chill out at home, cold drink, might get the paddling pool out, dip my toes in, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we don't have a paddling pool, so we will suffer in the I live in a glass house as well, so it feels like a greenhouse.
You do, yes.
So I'm just going to be really hot and grumpy, not being able to run, not doing anything.
I'm sure you'll get by.
I'll survive, won't I? People had it worse.
Sure.
I've been watching The Flash.
The Flash? Is this old Flash series?
Old Flash, yeah. I mean, it must be about 12 years old, I reckon. That I started watching it years ago, just when I met my husband. I started watching Green Arrow and The Flash and enjoyed them immensely. So I've gone back to it and started again. The Flash does feel a bit Smallville-esque in terms of a bit kind of teenager type watching. But I'm watching it and I'm quite enjoying it.
I did try I think I started watching Green Arrow.
Green Arrow's a bit meatier.
Yeah, you have to. The problem with the DC cinematic universe, or the TV version of that, if you like, is there's so much crossover, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you have to kind of watch everything in the right order. That I just didn't have the time for that. I got to that point and went, if I'm going to have to commit, this is a serious commitment I can't do.
Well, I've already committed to watching Law and Order. So, that was a huge commitment of my time.
But that's not got crossover with everything else, has it?
Has got crossovers with each other.
Oh my goodness.
I know, yeah, it gets quite intense.
So meta.
Yeah, it gets quite intense.
So again, going back, sort of full circle, I've got really tenuous links here, by the way. So we
Good, I like the way you're trying weaving it together, like making it like a narrative.
Look, if this is the best I can do, go with it. We've been talking about Easter eggs in films last couple of episodes, and I forgot some of my favourite Easter eggs in films. The Goonies one is still one of my all-time favourites, but the one I forgot about was that the droids from Star Wars are on the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones. So in the hieroglyphs, they are there. Yeah,
brilliant.
And the other one is that basically there is a George Lucas, Steven Spielberg love fest in movies. In Phantom Menace Episode 1, in the big council chamber, which is this huge room with the Senate room, You can see all the different pods of all the different alien races from Star Wars. And in one of the pods is a race of ET.
That's very cute.
And they're quite obvious as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are two of my favourites. But that's something that happens a lot. The other ones are the Pixar ones, because the Pizza Planet truck appears in every single Pixar movie from Toy Story onwards. It just appears randomly in the back, but lots of things are in there as well. Like the shining carpet is in Toy Story.
Oh, is it?
So the orange hexagonal,
Yeah.
orange and brown hexagonal carpet, that is in Toy Story, yeah. I think it's in, who's the kid, the bad kid next door? I think it's in his house. So it has this kind of...
I know who you mean, but I wouldn't
semblance.
know the name.
Yeah, I do know the name and I've completely forgotten it. But Easter eggs. So this is where I'm in tenuous link. So I just said I'd come back off holiday. And the one thing I do on holiday, which I don't do any other time, is get to read. Because most of the time, the reading I'm doing is for work or whatever. I don't get to read for pleasure, except when I go on holiday. So the last holiday I went on, I read Ready Player 2, which is the Ernest Cline novel, which is the sequel to Ready Player 1. I've not read Ready Player 1. I've watched the movie, the Spielberg movie, but I hadn't read the book. And I just assumed they were very similar. So I read Ready Player 1. And the tenuous link is Easter eggs, because it is the hunt for an egg, because it's all about Easter eggs hidden in 80s pop culture throughout the book and the film. But the book's really, really significantly different to the film, to the extent that it's almost like a different story. And it's strange when you read sort of book film crossovers, there's often, huge similarities or things that are cut out, but this is wildly different. And it's wildly different because it's probably far too geeky for just a movie, for a 90-minute movie that has to really grip people quite quickly with action. The book is really dense with pop culture references, video game references. It's just packed with them. And there's a nice little bit at the end, which is a sort of a reference to the author. And it's about Ernest Cline. It says something along the lines of, lives in Oregon with his family. He is a full-time geek. And you can see that he's very much that. The other thing, so I read that. I actually got through 2 books in the time I was away. So I read that one. And then the second book I read was Michael Crichton novel called Micro. And Michael Crichton, author of Jurassic Park and many other sort of science, techno, thriller, Congo, Sphere, lots of books that have been made into movies. They tend to have a real world kind of scientific warning as part of them, hence Jurassic Park. But the book I read is called Micro, which is the book he was working on when he died. So he had only written about a third of it, and then it's been finished off by another author called Richard Preston. It's all Crichton's ideas, all of his notes and everything that they kind of pulled off his computer after he died. So he'd fleshed out the story, but he'd only actually committed about a third of the novel to words. It's the first time, first of all, context, it's Jurassic Park meets Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So it's about micro-sizing objects, people, putting them into real world rainforest, and hence the Jurassic Park part, and they have to try to survive.
Why would you put them into a rainforest? That feels a little bit nasty.
I'd have to tell you kind of the plot in order to...
Okay. I will hold that question.
Sure. It's all set in Hawaii, where there's this company which is looking at the microbacteria and atomic level parasites and bacteria and things within the soil and the leaves, because they're looking for drugs to sell, things that they could synthesize into drugs as cures, because the natural world holds so many things that could be synthesized into remedies and drugs. But at the same time, they also produce micro-sized robots, but they do it because they've created a way where they can reduce down the size of things. Hence, a group of people get reduced down in size. And that's the kind of bit where I went, it's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And it kind of loses the real world science. The idea of extracting DNA from a mosquito trapped in amber from however many years ago to synthesize dinosaurs. Whilst I think that's been proven to be a load of old nonsense,
but it feels believable, doesn't it? It feels
believable. Chucking someone in a room where they get reduced down in size, very much like they've accidentally stood in front of a laser, Yeah. It's a bit, same thing happens in Tron as well, how he ends up in front of the laser and then ends up in the computer. It feels like a very lazy narrative device. Some of the stuff that actually happens once they're in the micro world of the rainforest is absolutely brutal, though. For example, one of them being a sort of semi-spoiler to it, I guess, but one of them being attacked by a wasp who lays eggs into the guy's shoulder.
Wasps are bastards.
Yeah, you know.
My mum's going to tell me off for saying that as well. She told me off for using the word crap. But wasps are nasty creatures. And I'm sure they do lots of good for everyone. Don't at me. But they're just, no.
Natural world, the life cycles are things are always beneficial to us and we don't know it, do we? It's the first time I've ever read a book and been thoroughly disappointed with it. Right.
Maybe it was the bit that he didn't write.
I don't know, because I think some of the stuff that is kind of set up. The premise is fine. The premise is very Michael Crichton. The premise is fine. And I wonder if it does lose its way because it's not completely written by him. But I think if he wrote the entire plot, then some of the things that are disappointing were his by design. I mean, one of the things that happens in the novel is they kill the protagonist in the middle of the book. If you imagine Jurassic World, but Alan Grant gets killed halfway through it, that's this book.
Yeah.
And I actually so we're sat in the bar on holiday. I was in Turkey. We're in the sort of bar area. And at the point that happened, I actually threw the book on the table in front of my family and said, I ain't reading that anymore. Like,
Did you
I
read
had a
it?
tantrum.
Well, I was going to say, after that, finished it after your tantrum.
After the next couple of days, I did finish it because I wanted to see where it went, given that had happened, because it sort of intrigued me. But at the same time, by doing that, it almost made the book completely irrelevant. And actually, by the time I got to and I think this is why I was so disappointed. By the time I got to the end, I kind of went two-dimensional.
Yeah.
The guy you were rooting for all along, yeah, I felt like I wasted my time.
So I put on a sort of a shout out. It was this time last year. I hadn't read a book, which was for pleasure, for 16 years. And I had a couple of recommendations. And for the life of me, I can't remember. I think one was called The Orbit. I was recommended that. Interestingly, although it was sold to me as being like an amazing book, really interesting, really engaging, I was quite disappointed by it. And I think there's something about men recommending books to women. It sounds really sexist. Anyway, I'm going to hold to it. That actually there's certain books like that have been recommended to me by men that I just haven't enjoyed at all. I don't know. So if there's any women listening, and actually we've got no women listening apart from my mum, if you'd like to recommend a book, that would be amazing for me.
But what sort of thing do you read, though? What sort of genre?
Well, when I did read, I used to read fantasy. David Gemmell, I think his name was. Gosh, it's been such a long time since I've read. The books that I really like are things which are about different cultures and traditions from the female gaze. So things like White Swan, The Good Women of China, Tractors of Ukraine or From Ukraine. And they're often female protagonists, and it might be biographical, talking about the impact of culture and traditions, politics on their lives individually. Really fascinating. So one of my favourite books of all time is The Good Women of China. It's a radio broadcaster. She receives a letter from someone in a rural part of China, and she's talking about some aspect of her life. And then the broadcaster goes travelling around China to find and collect these women's stories. And it's really interesting how politics and patriarchy really affects their day-to-day function. So everything from menstruation to marriage to relationships, really fascinating. So I like those sorts of books. Those are things. There we are. Got
Stereotypically not male books, or not
well
a male audience.
Saying that, I do like fantasy as well.
But you see, if you'd said sci-fi, I'd have gone generically, stereotypically male. Fantasy, I don't think is not as much.
No,
I would say fantasy is. I'd say it probably leans towards a male audience more, but I wouldn't say it was.
Yeah, it's not the only thing.
Male. Certainly not anymore.
The book I am reading, which is an education book, who's going to be a guest on this show, is Matt Pinkett's book, Unmasking the Manosphere, Tackling the Misogyny Crisis in Schools. That's really interesting, but that's not reading for pleasure per se, that's work. That's been quite interesting, and I'm looking forward to finishing that. But yeah, fantasy, women and politics, those are my stories. Those
are really diverse genres there, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't be further apart, could they, really? But, each to their own.
Yeah. Well, I used to like Michael Crichton as well. I used to read Michael Crichton. And I suppose that's sci-fi, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's sort of techno sci-fi. It's often a thriller element of horror in a lot of his books as well. I think his stuff's great. What people forget about Michael Crichton, by the way, is he's also the creator of ER.
Is he? I did not know
So
that.
if you think of ER, the really long-running hospital drama that made people like George Clooney famous, he created ER.
I did not know that.
And his books are really, really scientific as well. What I think people don't realise about his books, I mean, people know his stuff because of things like Jurassic Park, some of the other films. The depth to the research that he does is incredible, to the extent that he includes bibliographies in his novels of the books he's read, upon which is based a lot of the science.
I could never be that invested as a writer. Just letting you know.
And I think that's, I think that's the thing, that investment, that commitment to your craft is absolutely incredible.
Is that what I'm going to have to do when I go into acting and writing? Can't I just...
Well, you're talking about writing plays though, aren't you? I think that's a bit different.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not going to be scientific plays.
No, I think... It's
going to be chick lit.
Chick lit. I think that's the thing that makes him credible, or made him credible. It's still credible, as an author.
Apart from the last book that you're raging about.
I was just disappointed.
Did your family say, stop throwing a tantrum, get a life?
I think they just ignored me.
Good.
If I'm fair, to be fair. Yeah. And here's the other thing I did, talking about things I don't do that often. I did something I've not done in 28 years.
I'm intrigued.
I swam in the sea.
Hey, did things nibble your toes? Goldfish toes,
no.
My toes.
In fact, it's surprising we didn't see any. Oh, love Red Dwarf.
Good,
yeah,
fine.
Absolutely loved it. I got the reference.
Good. I was worried that you hadn't, and I was like, "Are we friends?" So yeah, you swam the sea.
So yeah, there was nothing, there was no jellyfish, anything in the sea, and it was a little bit
devoid
rocky
of life.
Yeah, and then it got very sandy. And where we were staying, it was a private beach for the hotel.
Lovely.
But out at sea, they had these floating pontoons that were a good couple of 100 yards off the beach, so you could swim out to them. They had steps on them. So you get up and then dive into the sea, because they were far enough out that you couldn't stand at the bottom and could dive. So my son, who's 10, who's never been in the sea, other than when they were babies and we would sort of paddle their feet in the sea at the beach. So that was the first time he went into the sea as well. So we both swam out to these pontoons. And I was thinking about it while I was in the water. I was like, when was the last time I've actually been in the sea? And I think the last time I was in the sea was in Greece, probably in about 98. And I know it was 98 because it was when we went there, it was the World Cup finals.
What is it with you and flipping football?
I'm not a big football. I can associate things that way.
It's like
but
a
it doesn't
timer.
mean. I would say in the past I was a much bigger football fan. World Cups in the past, I would have sat and watched every game of a World Cup. The last few, I've not been that interested. Yeah, so I wouldn't say I'm as big a football fan as I was in the past. I don't tend to go and watch many games, and I will watch England play in a competition, but that's kind of my commitment level.
Have you ever played football?
Yeah, when I was at school, I played sort of like Sunday football for a few years, but when I was sort of like 15, 16.
Yeah, I wasn't
never particularly good at it, but
no,
gave it a go.
Well, talking about not being good at things, I haven't run for 5 days because I injured my knee. I did 200 squats and my knee went. So I was like, okay, I'll rest. But I'm hoping to go running tomorrow. So I'm feeling not very good at things.
So I might run tomorrow.
Should we run together?
Yes, let's do it. Simply because, obviously, I took a 10-day break. I was just starting to really peak on my couch to 5K. And then I took a 10-day break to go on holiday. That 10-day break has now become a 12-day break.
Yeah, let's go tomorrow when it's cooler. So maybe about 8:30.
Yeah, it needs to be later in the evening. See, I don't mind running at this sort of time. So what is it? It's like 9:45 now that we're recording this. And I run, as I said in the last episode, I run sort of where we live in our neighbourhood, and that feels very safe. So I don't mind when it's dark doing that. Otherwise, I run in the woods, and I don't like to run in the woods when it gets a little bit too dark because, as I've said in the past, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat.
But you're not scared anymore.
No, have I told you about the time I scared myself the most?
No.
So I used to love watching. My wife tells this story a lot to people. She'll probably tell you at one time. So I used to watch a lot of programs like Most Haunted. You know, the Yvette Fielding
What
type
an
programs.
absolute waste.
I'm sure
your
we've
life.
talked. Yeah, I'm sure.
I think we have, and I think
I'm sure we've talked about it on here
because I said there's no such thing as ghosts because you're
No,
like
you
there's
said-
no
you
ghosts.
said-
I was like,
you said there's no such thing as haunted because
no,
that
there
became
is no
the
such thing
episode
as
title.
haunted. Yeah,
I think on
or
that episode,
ghosts.
I think on that episode, I must have told this story then that I watched so much Most Haunted that I scared myself and had to go and crawl into bed and then stop watching it.
I have so much respect for you, Matt.
This is just going. Anyway, there you are. Should we move on to some education chat then? I feel like we've geeked enough for this episode.
I just want to say, because you asked me what genre of books I like, it'd be nice, like if people suggest stuff, I'll give it a go, and then it might be you give me a new genre. I think it's time for me to enjoy reading again, as I said last year, and people gave me suggestions, but then it stopped. So Matt and I, a few weeks ago, as schools were kind of closing, I said to Matt, I'm really worried that there's not going to be enough educational news in which to talk about because schools aren't here. But actually, it's been a minefield and it's been really difficult to think of 1 or 2 or 3 things to talk about in today's session. Partly that's because I've asked people to be guest speakers in the next few weeks of podcasts. We've got a couple of really good guest speakers lined up as well to talk about different topics. So it might look like I'm missing things, but that's because I'm probably going to cover them another time. So one thing whilst you're on holiday, on the 3rd of August, there was Panorama episode investigating the Athena Learning Trust, which is 6 secondaries and 3 primaries across Devon and Cornwall. Former teachers, pupils and parents describe regime called authoritarian and cruel. So there was things such as pupils getting detentions for looking out of windows. There was one bit is actually I didn't think was particularly strict at all, that children weren't allowed to use the toilet the first 15 minutes of the lesson and the latter 15 minutes of the lesson, only in the middle. Actually, I was kind of like...
I've known that policy in schools for the last 20 odd years, so...
Kind of all right, really.
Yeah.
And I suspect if someone's absolutely busting, you go, off you go. Generally speaking, you know, you would hope. I mean, obviously, I suspect that perhaps that wasn't the case and that's why there's so many bits. But yeah, not being allowed to go to the toilet 15 minutes at the beginning and then at the end seemed to me fairly reasonable. And I've spoken about it before, Matt. I've you know, you've worked in the similar sector to me where actually, you know, a child might self-harm in a toilet. And I've had a child, and I can still remember it now, have a seizure in the toilet. And I didn't know how long the seizure was, which has a massive impact about whether or not I gave her the buccal medication and things like that. And she was locked in. It was awful. So actually, I probably come more of a strict perspective on toilet use, to be honest, because I think it can go very wrong very quickly. But there's lots of bits there about, you know, can you have, you know, strict versus chaotic in particular, and relational versus strict. I think you can have both as well. I think what was really interesting about the whole it's interesting about the different things happening in terms of what's considered strict and, you know, too authoritarian, and are there better ways to run schools. And actually, I kind of wanted someone who runs a school to have a conversation with us about it, although you run a trust, Matt, so, you know, you can talk about it as well. But what was interesting as well is that the trust was dissolving. So, and that was probably stopped by parents, local journalists and counsellors over 4 years. So I think there was a 4-year history before it came to the kind of forefront on our TV screens about some of the kind of problematic behavioural management systems in particular.
So with the toilet thing, as I say, that feels to me like a policy that I've experienced in schools, particularly in secondary schools.
Yeah, you don't have it in primaries. Kids wee.
Many times. Yeah. But, you know, many times. But you also have things in place for children who, you know, have medical passes or do need to go to the toilet more often. And you get to know who those children are and you understand those needs. I take your point on, though. There's a safety element as well to sort of children going off to the toilet who might be at risk.
And
there's ways around
those
that.
2 stories could have gone very, very differently.
Yeah.
Really differently.
Yeah.
And
I think
we had to lock the toilets because one child was hiding implements to cut herself, and that was the best way to mitigate risk. We would unlock the toilets for one child to go in and use them. Yeah.
So I was away. I didn't see the the panorama. I did read.
We were jumping off pontoons.
I was jumping off pontoons. Yeah, I did read about it. And it talked a little bit about the trust and schools. And I saw various things kind of backwards and forwards on LinkedIn, because that, that's where the conversation is around schools now, really, on social media, or the positive conversation around schools is on social media. I don't have an opinion really on strict, because you've got some of the best schools in the country, best performing schools in the country, who have very strict approaches, and they defend those strict approaches. But I don't. It's not been something I have done as a practitioner, and I think that's because I've never needed to. So I've never felt that that's a tool or a strategy or approach I've never needed to go to, because I've always worked quite closely with vulnerable children who often need a more nurturing approach, and so that has been the kind of the natural strategy set that I've used with young people. And I'm not just talking about special and AP. I'm also talking about mainstream as well.
I blogged about it, and I built my career with thinking about the children on the edges, the marginalised. So I come from it from that position rather than talking about the main. And I talk about the idea that actually there's a kind of stubbornly polarised view. The idea to get good results, you must have strict behavioural rules. I don't accept that as a choice. You can take a relational approach and get good results as well. But I also talk about the fact that it might work really well for the kids in the main. Do we, as school leaders, have capacity to think about how it affects the children on the edges? And that's my kind of concern, I think, is that we structure things, generally speaking, for the main. But then there was other bits, such as there was bits that, when you're reading a document, you'd have to use a ruler to kind of keep pace with whatever's been said. But that as a rule. And I thought, well, that rule might be really helpful for some children on the edges who find reading difficult. But then for the other children, they must be sitting there going, what the hell am I reading using a ruler?
What I can tell you as an English teacher is that doesn't help you to build independent reading skills. That to me feels like an intervention for a small group of children, not something that you should do en masse for all children.
And I think that's the thing, is there are some bits that might be really helpful for a small group of children, then being kind of done for all the children. And then for other things, it was those kind of rules will really affect those on the margins, actually.
Yeah.
So that was kind of that was where I came from in terms of my Substack. But I also, I kind of reflected on, I've got loads of kids, and, with 3 children under the age of 4, it's getting slightly better each time I say it. You've got to have a routine for everything. So every night we get all the drinks sorted, all the breakfast sorted in advance, all their clothes are ready, all lined out. And that means in the morning, dress 1, 2, 3, feed, boom, car. And that routine's really important. But without that routine, what you're doing is you're running from behind, and it becomes a real struggle. So my argument as well is that actually routine isn't the enemy of a relational approach.
No.
It's how you make one possible. Because if I didn't have that routine in the mornings, well, the evenings it starts to affect the mornings, then what would happen is I'd have chaos, I'd get really ratty, we would be running late, we wouldn't be able to do the nice things, and then it'd just kind of fall to pieces. So I think routine is really important, and I suppose it's how schools manage those routines and those systems. And I think sometimes school leaders don't reflect enough on, they might not have capacity or time, or anyone say, look, how is this really affecting the children in our school and our community? And I don't want to kind of speak ill of schools either, because I think they've got a really hard job. I've got such a hard job, I can't do it. I'm sitting here not running a school. But I do think we need to have more capacity to be reflective about what our actions lead to. Yeah,
routine, because it's consistency and routine. As well as I do, when you're working with children with needs, one of the best strategies you can use, or the 2 best strategies, are routine and consistency, because it gives a safe environment within which to build from. It gives an understanding. Young people with autism struggle when they move away from their routine, and they have to have it explained to them, sometimes in quite detail, and often very much in advance, before you make any kind of change, because that change affects them. So you're absolutely right when you say that, routine is not your enemy at all. I don't subscribe to the idea that the only way that you can achieve good behaviour or get the outcomes that you need to get is through strict approaches, though, because I've worked in alternative provisions where, in order to get the outcomes we needed to get, in order to get the relationships, to create the really positive climate, we couldn't have done that through a strict approach, because the strict approach would not have worked for those children, because they've come from a system where they struggled with some of the expectations and routines. So you have to create something different. And I take pride in the fact that when I was a head teacher in our PRU for permanently excluded young people, we had better behaviour than the 2 secondary schools which were on the other side of the road. And I take huge pride in that, but that does not come from a strict approach. That comes from a nurturing, relational approach.
Always seeing when someone has done something well.
Yes.
Continuing to say, you've done something well.
Can I just go back, by the way? Because you said...
You're not allowed to?
Just a second, because I didn't want to... Basically, because I didn't want to interrupt your flow earlier on. When you introduced this segment, you said about how there might not be news educationally because it's the summer holidays. You've forgotten that teachers aren't allowed summer holidays anymore, or any holiday anymore, because there's this expectation that people will just work through. Last episode, I talked about the whole kind of Monday morning at 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. is only a minute after 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. And, the weekend is not your time to direct people. That's my family's time. Thank you very much. It's the same with holidays. Now, I'm in a different position where the job I now do in education means that I do have to work part of the holidays. And at the moment, I'm leading quite a significant project that if I didn't work the holidays, just would not happen, as you well know. But it's interesting you say that that idea of, didn't think there'd be news because it's the holidays. Of course there is.
Loads.
Because the people who create policy, the people who introduce these ideas, do it at a time when it's not suitable for most teachers or school leaders, but there's just an expectation that we will absorb it, learn it. We talked about it, I don't know, two episodes ago, even last episode. We talked about how late the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance is published because teachers, school staff, everybody, in fact, who is within the school community has got to know that stuff on the 1st of September.
Yeah, just run with it.
And it's just become an unrealistic expectation within education now. Beyond my usual soapbox about teachers of the world police, but now it's that whole kind of expectation that your time is no longer your own. And that's where the profession has gone. And unfortunately, that's why we end up with so many news stories through holidays, through the summer. And we're expected to keep up.
It kept us going, which is quite nice.
I mean, it's great for us because it gives us something to talk about.
In all fairness,
for your average teacher, it's kind of unreasonable.
In all fairness, the news, the stuff that I've picked up has been on media kind of pushed, if nothing else. But some of the stuff that I haven't spoken about is kind of policy direction, which we will hopefully cover. So, and the next thing, and probably the last thing, was Channel 4 has a programme coming out called The Great ADHD Myth, ? The film seeks to determine whether ADHD is a genuine neurodevelopmental disorder or a social construct, and asks whether we should be giving children mind-altering drugs to treat it. Its own press line. NHS England data shows a 200% rise in suspected ADHD referrals between 2020 and 2025 across all age groups, though the film focuses on children. The film hears from medical experts, formerly senior in NHS, in the conventional narrative follows a family trying holistic lifestyle changes to remove one boy's medication. Boys aged 10 to 14 are the largest medicated group.
Okay, so here's my immediate take on it. Irrespective of how you feel about ADHD, whatever it is, the place to do this is in a medical journal, not on Channel 4. Okay, it is not, right. We are talking about a medical condition. What the premise, look, that premise has been floating around in education for 20, 30 years. The idea, is it a real thing? Isn't it a real thing? When I started as a teacher, we're going back, 24 years ago, people were like, well, it's ADHD, it's not real, is it? That was kind of the narrative that I was hearing as a young teacher. Okay, so there's certainly a divisive attitude towards ADHD, what it is, the degree. Forget all that. Irrespective of how you feel about it, irrespective of what your opinion is, irrespective of what, I'm not a medical professional who can give an accurate answer to this question. This should be left to real medical professionals and science to tell us whether this is accurate. That question should we be given minor. We're into left versus right debate about whether or not we should give kids drugs. No, this is not a place. TV is not the place to debate this. It's not a debate. It's a scientific study. So do it in the right place.
In terms of its kind of history, 1968 had it was probably the kind of what you would see is called the hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. So even from 1968 it was evident. In 1902, there were descriptions of it from a medical perspective. You had ADD in 1980. And one of the questions that the channel tries to look at is medication. Actually, only 25% of children and 15% of adults with ADHD receive medication. And that is against trial evidence, medical evidence. Between 70 to 90% of those people would actually benefit. And what happens is England undertreats. There doesn't seem to be an increase in the diagnosis of ADHD as time has gone on. So there's about 4.8 boys to every girl. There's been more diagnosis of adults. I think in particular, 17% of females with ADHD are diagnosed in adulthood versus 8% of males. So to me, I think what there needs to be is better diagnostic criteria, fine, and clearer pathways for children. Because what you're having is adults, and actually adults our age, Matt. A few of my friends have been diagnosed with ADHD as adults, especially the females, and not just the females though. And these are, people that have struggled, but also are acutely aware that they've struggled in ways that they've found things difficult, but they're working hard, but just want to have a better understanding of themselves. I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that's better information, potentially.
I have the same experience that I know friends, colleagues who have had recent diagnosis, in their 30s, 40s, and it has helped them to understand why things are happening for them and why things have happened in the past, and it's helped them to build their own new routines and structures. Yeah. So it's not like they then go out and get the medication. I don't actually know any adults who have then gone on to medication as a result. So now I know it happens. It does happen.
A few of my female friends are on medication and have found it really helpful.
Yeah.
They've had to make some lifestyle changes as well. It's interesting, this talks about kind of lifestyle changes, and therefore ADHD must be a social construct, I suppose is the argument. But social prescribing happens all the time. I don't just take medication for my mental health issues, but there's clear things that I have to do from a kind of social prescription in changes, going to sleep, making sure I don't drink caffeinated tea, all those kind of things that hopefully make me better. That doesn't mean that my condition doesn't exist. It means that you have a holistic approach to curating your health.
Because there is no single approach to supporting or helping people with certain conditions, particularly conditions like mental health. But it must be the same as well with things like ADHD, because my educational experience of ADHD has been a spectrum, a bit like my experience of autism has been a spectrum, that you see children who are diagnosed with ADHD presenting different types and characteristics and behaviours.
And you will be shaped by your character and your personality as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think when you say ADHD, people immediately think of a child who can't sit down, who's just bouncing around a room. And that's not necessarily what ADHD is at all. That on a spectrum, there are children who might find it difficult to stay still or sit down, who are constantly fiddling. But likewise, on the spectrum as well, it could be to do with the lack of concentration or control. So there are other things there. Again, look, I've said it already. This is a Twitter argument in a TV program, because you're going to get, think of the worst. In fact, I found something the other day which is really good. And I don't know if do you know the work of Dave Gorman, the yes. comedian?
Yeah, I do.
Dave Gorman, fabulous. I've seen Dave Gorman live a couple of times. I've met Dave Gorman at the end of shows, chatted with him. And one of the things he does, which is in his TV program, but you can buy it as a book as well, it's called Found Poetry. And what he does is he sees a particular news article and then he goes down to the comment section. And he takes the comments and he turns the comment section into poetry.
Brilliant.
And he presents this on his TV program, but he's got a small book as well of the found poetry. So, and in fact, the reason I remember it is because I found it today. I was reading it today because I've got a signed copy of one, and I love it. But this is what this is. This is the comment section, because this is one of those things which is a debate that people will have completely uninformed, right? And I feel like in today's society, we have more and more of these uninformed debates about all sorts of things, whether it's education, politics, society, whatever. And we put them into the public eye through the media, when actually we should be dealing with them in the right places. And here, this is a medical debate. Well, it's not a debate. It's a medical study. That's what it is. It should be done in a medical journal, not on a bloody Channel 4 TV program.
With one family, which might not be indicative of anything.
Yeah, I mean, one family, what's that the basis for it?
Yeah, it does feel like it's clickbait, isn't it, essentially? That's what it is.
Journalistically, it feels disingenuous because it feels like it's being done to create a debate that doesn't need to happen, because it's not for us to debate. It's like, right, we want to make a TV program that's like autism. Is it real or isn't it? You know, the myth of autism. Come on.
I think that's what I said. So I spoke to someone for the BBC, BBC Radio 4, because they were querying whether or not to have me in to have a discussion about ADHD and having a debate. And they didn't choose me. I'm very disappointed. But I said it would be like saying, Tourette's real. Wouldn't do it. He wouldn't have that.
SEMH, let's have the same debate over SEMH.
Wouldn't
do it.
Well, SEMH isn't a diagnosis then. So you could say anxiety or something like that.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I know there's a bit of a catch-all to some of that. But at the same time, there are real conditions there as part of that. But we know SEMH is a growing area of concern.
One thing I was going to talk about, one of my favourite things, I might have mentioned this to you before. If not, I'm going to send you lots of text messages when I'm in Yorkshire. One of my favourite things is to go on to TripAdvisor and to look at bad reviews of natural places. So there's things such as the Butter Tubs in Yorkshire, which is a beautiful scenic route. It's absolutely stunning. It's glorious. You know, you see mountainsides, beautiful countryside, and then you read the reviews for it. It's amazing. Like, this is rubbish and stuff like that. I love doing that. Just I was thinking about the comments.
It's a brilliant thing. So there's a great one here in Derbyshire. Well, it's in the Peaks. I maybe about 20, 30 minutes from where I live in the Peaks is there is a plane wreck. So there's a crashed plane.
Brilliant.
The wreckage of it is strewn on a hilltop. Right?
It's amazing.
So you've got the engine there and it's there. And people go to it. And I guess some people will go very solemnly. They'll go with a kind of sense of, sadness and, because somebody was flying that. I'm not sure if the story even exists as to, I will look it up and use it. We'll come back to it another time. But this plane is there. Some people it'll represent sadness. Some people will go just to look at the awe of it. And then some people write about how much of a bloody mess it is that nobody's cleaned it up.
Love it. Love it. I remember one place in Turkey, which is you could stay in caves in Turkey. It was really kind of basic, staying in a cave, beautiful. One person gave it like 1-star review because there was no Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. Okay.
It's just where we are, isn't it?
I love it. I will send, so when I go to Yorkshire and I'll be looking at like beautiful places, I will send you a message with my favourite TripAdvisor.
Please do.
I'm sure you'll be on the edge of your seat.
Well, incidentally, so again, full circle back to where we started in the episode. I was on holiday, went to Turkey. We stayed in a really, really beautiful resort. And whilst we were there, for some reason, my wife decided to look on TripAdvisor to see what the comments were. It was one of the first times we've been somewhere and we said we'd come back here. Like next year, we would come back here. It's been so good. One of the reasons, I'm going to get into trouble for this comment, right? One of the reasons why it was so good was because there were so few English people there. It was quite heavily Turkish. There were a lot of Turkish people there. There were quite a few Russian people there. Towards the end, there was a larger contingent of Irish people turned up, and then a few more British people. But there were a small smattering of British people. It was a lovely atmosphere. People were very pleasant. Apart from at the buffet, and I think I text you about that, because buffets at all-inclusives are like feeding time at the zoo. The greed is just horrendous and I absolutely hate it. Anyway, again, stories for another time. For some reason, we looked on TripAdvisor, and on TripAdvisor, there was somebody who was currently there who had left a review who said it's awful because nobody here speaks English.
Yes, love it. That's what I'm here for. I love those kind of reviews. Yeah, you go to a foreign country and you expect everyone to speak English. Absolutely. But also, just use Google Translate. It's not even hard.
Yeah, but the ridiculous thing was everybody did speak English.
And everyone speaks English, yeah. I would be surprised if they didn't. When I've been
we had no problem communicating with anybody.
I've been in India. I forgot to mention that. I've been in India for 2 days for work. It was very tiring. That's the story.
You avoided all of the dodgy food and dodgy illnesses.
People were falling like flies. Yeah. There were people in their hotel rooms with IV drips. There were the poor lady next to me, I won't mention her name, was puking up next to me when we were getting a taxi back to the airport. People were pooing, they were vomiting. I was like, I'm going to touch no one. I'm going to trust nothing. I'm going to just not eat salad, not have any water unless it's bottled. And I survived. I can say it a week later. I did not become unwell, which I think, frankly, was an incredible feat.
I think because you were surrounded by so much illness, you did really bloody well to get through.
Like someone went to go and give me a hug after he'd been sick. I was like, I ain't having
No, thank you. Unlike the people, so on our transfer back to the airport on our travel day coming home, so we were the first pick up at our hotel. And then we picked up some English people at another hotel. And as I say, we had a fantastic time. We couldn't fault the place we were at. But we picked up this group, probably a few families from a much larger hotel, much newer hotel, and they could not stop going on about how much of a horrible week they'd had.
No.
And people were talking about just how ill they'd been and all these sorts of things. It's like, did you not read the reviews? Because we'd looked at that hotel and we dismissed it because of what we'd read, which is why we went for the other one. But people don't prepare themselves. They don't think about, you said you only drank bottled water. We only drank bottled water. In fact, the water that was available to us, it was all bottled. Everything was bottled or cartoned. You wouldn't even think of drinking anything else. But there was a lot of, I think the risk there was a lot of fresh food, fresh vegetables, fresh salads.
It has to be cooked.
I had all of it. And because the one thing I do on a all-inclusive is I eat a lot of salads and proteins, and all of it was just really good, really clean, really fresh, no issues whatsoever. Lots of fresh fruit. It was incredible.
No, I didn't.
Water is the one thing where I would never drink anything other than.
I didn't trust any salads in India. I had cooked
I wouldn't.
food.
Yeah, and I think in India it's very different, and I think you're warned against salads in India, aren't you? But in Turkey, the food was fantastic.
Yeah, so far the countries that I've been to, I've been okay and I haven't become poorly. But I don't drink alcohol either. I don't eat meat. I don't eat seafood. And it'll just be cooked food generally.
We talked holidays, we talked travel, we've gone back to Easter eggs. I've talked a bit about books. And we've picked up on some of the educational issues that have happened during the holidays, even though school is out, but some of us are still working. So thank you for joining us once again. I think this is episode 18, 17, 18, one of those two. You'll know because it will be written on the episode when you come to watch it. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Sarah Johnson.
I'm Matt Morris, and we have
nothing to bring.